All right, guys, so here we are now talking about mixed costs. And as you can probably tell from the word, mixed means it's a mixture, right? It's a combination of something. So mixed cost is a cost that have a small element or a bit of element of variable costs plus fixed costs, okay? So here's a really good example. So assume that Simpson Inc. manufactures cells using rented machinery. So the rental charges is as follows. So it's $15,000 per year plus $1 for each hour used in excess of 10,000 units. So if I am doing this calculation, or if I am looking at or trying to consider how to charge someone, at the very bottom of your screen, you have maybe an example of how they would go about charging someone. So let's just be clear, no matter what, if you have a rental agreement with my company or Simpson Inc., no matter what, you will be paying $15,000 per year. That is base, that is your fixed cost, no matter what. Now, from here, the variable portion of this is the 10,000 hours, right? So anything above 10,000 hours, you're gonna pay a dollar per hour or $1 each hour. Now, in our very first example, we had someone that rented maybe some machinery, right? But they only use 8,000 hours, right? So right now, what that looks like is, no matter what, you are going to charge them $15,000, right? But for them, because they did not use the machinery in excess of the 10,000 hours, they are only charged a fixed rate of $15,000, right? They use less than the 10,000 hours, so there's no additional charge, okay? Now in the second one, we have 12,000 hours. So again, let's not forget, no matter who it is, if they're renting our machinery, we will charge them $15,000 no matter what. Now, the reason why this one is 17,000 is because they went 2,000 over our max, right? So we said, hey, anything over $10,000, you will be charged $1 per hour, right? And so for these people, they went over by 2,000 hours, right? 2,000 hours. They used the machinery for 12,000, right? So this is the math that they're calculating. 12,000 hours that they use less what the contract stated, which was the 10,000 hours. And so the difference is 2,000 hours. And then we're going to do that 2,000 hours times the rate that we say of anything in excess, right? So it was $1. So we're going to do 2,000 times $1 per hour. And that comes out to $2,000, right? So what we're doing is doing the $15,000 we charge them plus the $2,000 that $2,000 that we're charging them in excess of that 10,000 hours. Because they went over by 2,000 hours, we're going to charge them an additional fee, and that is representative of the variable portion. Okay. All right, so what I would say is a good example of variable cost is usually a person on commission, right? So a lot of dealerships or a lot of people that sell cars or, salespeople, they'll have a base salary, right? So they're like, no matter what, no matter how many cars I sell, my base salary is usually maybe say somewhere around the lines of $40,000, right? Sorry, my pen is not. $40,000, okay? So no matter what, I'm gonna get paid $40,000. Now, to sweeten the deal, any car that I sell over, if I sell more than 2 cars, then all of that will be plus commission. So my base rate plus commission, right? The commission is the variable portion of their pay, right? So again, that's a really good example of mixed cost, okay? All right, so if for my visual learners, here's a graph of what mixed costs look like. So this line represents the fixed portion. And then once you get past that fixed portion, this represents this represents the variable portion. So once you hit that line, this is my variable. So you guys take a second, go through this and see if you can figure out if this will be variable cost versus mixed cost or fixed cost, okay? It's a really good example to go through. All right, so let's talk about the high-low method of mixed cost, okay? So more times than likely, when you're in an organization, they want to understand how their cost behaves. And so what they'll do is they'll give you some information, or you'll have some data about their production and how many units they produce and things of that nature. And so what they'll do is they'll look at, you'll have some data regarding how many units they produce and the costs associated with producing those units. And again, because they want to understand how their cost behaves, they're going to ask the managerial accountants on staff or what have you and say, hey, what can I expect my cost to look like in the future, right? And so the high-low method allows us to come up with a formula to predict, to do some kind of prediction as to what the cost will look like in the future, okay? So mixed cost is separated into fixed and variable costs for analysis, okay? So we're trying to figure out what portion, so in looking at this example from June to October, we're trying to understand what portion is fixed and what portion is variable, right? So right now, I would tell you there is no, based on the information we have now, there is no way we can figure this out, right? It's just numbers all over the place and we don't know what's the relationship between them. And so that's what the high-low method allows us to do, create some kind of relationship with the numbers produced and the total cost. Now, as the high-low method mentions, it looks at the highest level of activity and it looks at the lowest level activity, and then we're going to do a formula to help us figure this out. Okay, so for example, assume that equipment maintenance department at Cashion Inc. incurred the following costs during the next 5 months or the past 5 months. So what this looks like is, first off, we need to identify what's the highest level of activity, right? So looking through this, the highest level of activity is in August, and the lowest level of activity, given this information, is October, right? So now from here, we can take this information and only look at or only focus on August and October information, right? So when we're doing the high-low method, first and foremost, we're going to figure out what's the variable cost or the variable portion, all right? And so to do so, we're going to look at, this is our formula to figure it out for the variable, for the variable cost, okay? Whatever, I'm gonna do this. All right, so the way we do that is, again, figuring out the variable cost per unit. So first is gonna be the difference in total cost divided by the difference in units produced. So our difference in total cost for August is gonna be 61,500 less the 41,250. And then in the number of units produced, this part is gonna be 2100, excuse me, less 750. And that's how they came up with these numbers, right? And so once we whittle it down and do simplification, it comes out to $15 per unit. That is our variable cost per unit. Now from here, we're going to figure out what is our, now we're going to try to figure out what is the fixed component now, okay? So in trying to figure out the fixed cost, this is our formula. It is going to be our fixed cost equals total cost minus variable cost per unit times the number of units produced. Now, before we get into that, I want to make sure I make known that this is our formula. Sorry, this is the formula for total cost. Your variable cost plus fixed cost equals total cost. Now, in this portion, all we did was moved around the equation to get fixed cost on its own, okay? All right, so from here, when we're figuring out the fixed cost, you're gonna take only one the highest or the lowest level. So to plug this in, you're going to do fixed cost equals my total cost. So maybe we choose the highest one, which is the 61,500, because that represents total cost, minus my variable cost. Well, we just figured out our variable cost is $15 per unit. Okay. All right. Now, from here, we're going to plug in this amount, our total number of units produced, to come out with our fixed cost. Now, to do so, we're going to forget that this is here. But anyways, we're going to go equals 61,500 minus our $15 per unit times the number of units, which is our, again, $2,100. I mean, 2,100 units, right? So don't forget to do, please excuse my dear, whoever that person is. So we do 15 times 2,100, and that's going to equal to 31,500. And then we're going to do 61,500 like that, right? So in doing so, this will allow us to come up with our fixed cost. So our fixed cost comes out to $30,000, okay? Now, it doesn't matter if you chose October or August to do this calculation, your fixed cost would still have been $30,000. Now, to write out my formula, my new formula, trying to figure out cost, it's going to be here. My formula is total cost equals my fixed cost of $30,000 plus my variable cost of $15 per unit. Okay. So say for instance, maybe a maintenance guy comes to you, or maybe a manager comes to you and say, hey, I want to estimate the total cost. Now I'm here. I want to estimate the cost if I produce 12,000 units. Well, I mean, or 2,000 units, excuse me. So what you're going to do is take this 2,000 units and plug it into this equation. And this is how we can now predict what our cost will be given the high-low method. And this is just one of a few ways that you can predict costs going forward, okay?